right, it is 6 o'clock, so I will call this committee of the whole meeting to order. Can I have an approval of the agenda? Councillor Day?
Thank you. I just have one item that I would like to ask the committee to decide if they would like to add it to the agenda tonight. And I put a copy of the email on your desk, or actually staff did for me, since I wasn't in the building today. Just regarding the fish ladder, the Millstream Fishway project, we did receive correspondence after the grant request was denied for $16,000, asking us if we would consider a smaller amount of grant requests. So we have the detail of that meeting in our minutes, and just would like to know if the committee would like to consider that under old business, and that way that would allow the decision to be reflected in the minutes and the correspondence that we've received.
Okay, so you're asking that this be added under old business?
Under old business, one item being the Millstream Fishway project.
Can I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended, please? So moved. Moved. Any discussion? Councillor Nault?
We discussed this at the committee meeting when the request was made. Committee turned it down. I think it's entirely inappropriate to bring it back, because if we do this for one requester, we're going to have to do it for all of them. So I will be opposing the amended agenda.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I just will point out, too, when we're looking at under 5.2 under presentations, I believe the desire, when you're looking at the order, the desire is to move the policing presentation up to the top to allow Inspector Chalman to vacate. Okay. So if there's no further discussion, all those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. We have one set of minutes from January the 15th. If there are no errors or omissions, can I have a motion to adopt the minutes?
So moved.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Public participation. Chris? Okay. I will not. There's no one beating the bushes to come up to the mic. We will move on to old business. Councillor Day.
Thanks. Just wanted to have it on the agenda to look at the email that we received from Peninsula Streams regarding the Millstream Fishway project with a revised funding request. Basically, they had asked for $16,000. They're asking if we're willing to consider a smaller grant. And I think that I recognize that there is a deadline and there was that whole review process. But we did receive this correspondence, and we did receive a request. And it's a very busy, hectic meeting when we're looking at those grants and aids. So I felt that given that they had made the deadline and didn't have an opportunity to articulate what they would be able to do with less. I mean, I have no idea if the project would still be viable with a smaller request. It appears that it would still be viable with a smaller grant amount based on their letter. So I would be prepared to support $1,000 towards the Fishway project, and I would so move.
Okay, we have the motion on the floor. Any discussion? Councillor Nault?
Yes, if you recall at the meeting where these were discussed, it was Langford Culvert in a CRD park. I don't think we should be spending Colwood taxpayers' money on Langford projects for the CRD, especially given how little the CRD has done for our parks in the last 15 years. So I will be opposing any contribution.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Day?
Just one very brief point, and that my reason for considering the project, recognizing that it's a Langford infrastructure that we're trying to get the fish around, and that is a CRD park that it flows through. There's also a significant amount of that waterway that benefits the city of Colwood, including all along the Galloping Goose Trail, in behind McDonald's, etc. And it's been shown that the spawning of fish in the stream does truly benefit all the surrounding area of the green space. So that's my basis for supporting the request.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor? Opposed? It's defeated.
No, I was in favor.
Oh, were you in favor? Sorry, let's do that again. All those in favor? Opposed? It's tie, so it's defeated. Under new business, 5.1, a presentation budget process overview. Mr. Paine.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Pleased to be with you today, and special welcome to our jubilant public that we have with us. So today, I'm going to start out with a presentation to provide an overview of the budget process that has been undertaken so far, the steps that remain in the budget process, and just some high-level points that have come out of this process. Then we intend on jumping into the core operating budget by departments. We'll present the departments one at a time. Deputy Director Hepton and I will go back and forth, and the directors of those respective departments will be available for any detailed questions you might have. As mentioned, we'll begin with the policing shortly after this presentation as well. Now, I was going to suggest that throughout the presentations there be made time for public participation after each core budget. I'll leave that to the chair whether that's necessary given the size of the gallery at the moment. But happy to answer questions throughout the presentations or after as you seem necessary. So you will notice the financial plan that you have before you is presented in a different way that you might be used to. So I thought I would go through the organization of the financial plan and how it's presented to begin with. So you notice, first of all, we discuss service plans in the financial plan, and that essentially is your core budgets, your year-to-year operating costs for the provision of services that each department provides. In each of those core budgets, you'll find new operating budget items, and these are essentially expanded pressures on existing core services. So it's not for provision of a new service or a new type of budget, but it's as a result of community growth and how that has expanded our core budgets. We'll also detail the special projects as they pertain to every core budget, and we'll discuss them in detail as we go through the budget. In the final financial plan meeting in March, we'll have an opportunity to review the entire core budget as well as special projects in total as well. And then you'll notice we have a capital plan nearing the end of the financial plan, and it also covers the asset management that the city is undertaking. And the structure of the capital plan budget has been restructured such to deliver the message that asset management is a core responsibility of the entire city and all the staff. And so we've prepared the budgets in such a way that it's organized by asset type. So, for instance, we'll go through all road infrastructure at one time. We'll go through all of equipment at one time, given that these budgets are a responsibility of all the departments at once. So here's the budget process overview as was outlined back in December when we agreed on the budget timeline. This is the first of our core budget review, and it will include admin, finance, IT, fire, policing, building and bylaw, and planning. So that covers about half of the core operating budget. 2 weeks from now, we'll present the core budgets for engineering, public works, parks, the library, West Shore Parks and Rec, and the sewer. So two busy two busy meetings, but we hope to get through both of those core budgets in these two meetings. Shortly after that, the next day, we'll talk about capital and asset management, and then we'll have an opportunity, May 5th, to discuss the entire budget and wrap up and review anything that needs to be reviewed. If need be, some of the capital can be discussed in March 5th, but we're hoping that we can go through capital on the February 20th meeting as well. Okay. So just wanted to highlight some high-level things that occurred in this year's budget. There are some cost pressures. The normal labor increases have been integrated into the core budgets. Fire dispatch is a key cost pressure, which we'll talk about in more detail in the fire presentation today. And then the election, of course, occurring at the end of this year, adding some pressure to this year's budget as well. But there are some core savings that occurred this year. There was reduced WorkSafe BC premiums, significant reductions there. And we're going to discuss that in the admin budget, the corporate admin core budget. There's reduced MSP premiums due to the province phasing out or reducing the MSP premiums. And we have some mobile device contract savings ever since our new IT coordinator came on board. We also have some increased revenues, which is good to see. We expect an increase in our investment revenues, and we also have an increase in our works and services revenue for our subdivision bylaw. So here's overall how the financial plan, what does it boil down to as it is right now, of course subject to council's direction. At the moment, there's a core increase of $174,000, and that would result in a 1.3% tax increase to all property classes. There's new construction revenue anticipated almost nearing $500,000, and the plan recommends that we use much of that construction revenue, $264,000, for to offset the new operating budget pressures that have resulted from growth. And we recommend that the remaining $230,000 be an increase to our annual transfer to reserve for sustainable infrastructure replacement. This year we haven't, for this financial plan, we haven't been able to calculate exactly what our sustainable infrastructure replacement funding level should be. Those are the levels that we should be setting aside on an annual basis to ensure that our capital and our infrastructure is replaced sustainably. However, we do know that we're below that level. There's no question about that. So we recommend using this opportunity to increase those transfers to reserves on a sustainable basis. The budget summary recommends $1.1 million in special projects, and much of this is for affordable housing contribution, which council has previously approved, so they're just showing up in the budget. And that's funded from the Affordable Housing Reserve. The remainder of these special projects are funded from our accumulated surplus. And there's a strategic reason behind that, because special projects are volatile in nature. They're not regular, ongoing. Often they're one-time expenses. So we want to fund them with one-time funding, which is our accumulated surplus. We don't want to fund them with taxes, otherwise we would see great volatility in our tax rates. And there's $2.5 million recommended for capital for roads, fleet equipment, software, and other things, which we'll get into February 19th. Overall, the financial plan recommends a $100,000 increase to our transfers to reserve when compared to last year. However, I will note that the transfer to reserve, the sustainable transfer to reserve increase recommended is significantly greater than $100,000. Some of the transfer to reserves last year were tied to a building permit revenue, which you'll see later today. We're projecting a decrease. So the associated transfer to reserve with that has been decreased as well. But the transfers to reserve that are regular annual have gone up significantly should the financial plan be adopted as recommended. Okay. So that's the overall picture. Well, what we're going to do now is we'll jump into the core operating, and we're going to start with our RCMP budget, our policing budget, which you will find on page 33 of your financial plan document. Before I begin, are there any questions that council or the public wants to ask at this time before we jump into the core budgets?
No? Oh. Mr. Saunders.
Good evening, Mayor, council, staff, audience. Dave Saunders, 813 Pears Road. Is this where I would ask about the 9/11 dispatch? This segment, or are you going to deal with that at a different time?
That's probably under the fire dispatch or fire department's budget?
Yes, that would be correct. Yeah.
Okay, so
Sorry.
just wait for that then, or?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Sir, you had a quick question, Mayor?
Chris, if you back up to the draft budget summary, page 1 before this, the new construction revenue and then the 2 additions on there are out. They don't. Are they supposed to match up?
The 264,000 and 230,000?
Yes.
Yeah, they're supposed to equal approximately the 495,000.
Approximate. So I don't have to, because it comes to 495, 475.
Okay, noted. Thank you very much.
All right. Go for it.
Do any members of the public, would they like the policing budget displayed on the screen? Otherwise, we'll just launch right into it's in your agenda package on the financial plan, page 33, as mentioned. So this year, the financial plan recommends an increase for the contracted policing services to increase from $2.8 million approximately to $2.86 million. That is the budget recommended by the RCMP, based on 16.6 strength. That increase does include a provision for an increase to personnel costs. I noticed in the budget there was some significant savings from their pension actuarial was reduced. So there was about $50,000 in savings in the RCMP budget that occurred there. One thing I will note is the variance from the 2017 actuals to the 2017 budget. And you'll notice that the 2017 actuals for contracted policing services we're expecting to be around $2.1 million, and our budget was $2.8 million. So that's creating essentially a $600,000 policing surplus. And that's almost completely due to the average strength that the RCMP was actually able to police at during the year. That average strength through the year was about 13.8 through the year. So if there's fewer cops on the street, then we get billed for that as well. So that surplus gets set aside in the police operating budget surplus. Moving on to the support services and buildings, so there's a modest increase of 0.6% increase, and that doesn't include the request to increase full-time equivalents for court liaison and exhibit officers. And then there's a modest increase for the crime prevention program. So as mentioned, the support services division, if you're unfamiliar with the structure, the City of Colwood directly staffs a number of staff that work at the West Shore Detachment, including support services and court liaison. And they're finding that the resources that they currently have for the court liaison and exhibit clerk positions are not meeting the needs of the growing community there. So they've requested an additional 0.5, which would result in an annual ongoing increase of $41,000 approximately. And that 0.5 additional FTEs would also help address some of the needs they have to pass on knowledge. So succession planning would be included there as well. So that would conclude my comments on the policing budget. As mentioned earlier, Inspector Choman is here if you have any detailed questions about the RCMP policing, and I'm happy to answer any questions for you as well.
Thank you. Before we go to the public, Inspector, did you have anything to add to Christopher's comments? Great. Thank you. So we'll open it up to the public if you have any questions for staff or the inspector. Seeing none, committee, Councillor Day.
Thank you. Just looking at the numbers that are presented here, are there no other municipalities sharing in the costs, or is this just Colwood's portion for the court liaison?
Correct. So our court liaison, all three of our court liaison people right now, there's three people doing our court liaison exhibit custodian positions, but two of them are job sharing. Those are Colwood specific positions. So our detachment's broken down, and we're trying to keep job functions within the general area. So our watch clerks, court liaison exhibits are Colwood employees. The other people are funded by Langford and our Langford employees, with some of those members or some of those municipal employees back end funded through the View Royal. So all the records, keeping that is happening, all of our disclosure clerk, all of that, which services the entire community, is dealt with by the Langford employees, and the Colwood employees do watch clerk and court liaison exhibit.
So I guess there's no way to tell then Colwood's court liaison workers would be handling just as much Langford files as Colwood files, as View Royal files. You've simply broken it out by who has chosen to support which positions?
So you're correct. The Colwood employees will manage all the files, and we don't break it down. As a blended detachment, operationally, we police the West Shore, so we don't break that down. From a funding perspective, in the back end, we look at dividing that up. What has happened in the past, and I'll use the watch clerks as an example, is we had watch clerks who were Langford employees and watch clerk who were Colwood employees, and we ended up with employees doing the exact same job, different benefits, different rates of pay, and that created a lot of internal conflict, as you can imagine, within those employees' categories. So when we had the opportunity, we converted all the job classifications within the same, so the CLOs and exhibit custodians all fall under one contract, and they all have the same benefits and pay. The watch clerk's the same, and all the other record functions are receiving similar pay and benefits because they're all Langford employees and they're doing similar positions.
So how would the taxpayers of Colwood know that they're funding the correct, appropriate share at the detachment then? If we're paying for the court liaison officers, which I understand your reasoning, is there any formula that you use to quantify the costs for RCMP services to each municipality?
Short answer is yes, and we probably are not on track for any of our communities to be paying where we should be or funding where we should be with their municipal employees. On average, there is no set standard across the province, and we've researched that, and typically when I do presentations and say that we need a regular member increase, that coincides that we need to keep the municipal employee ratio consistent. And what we would shoot for, and what seems to be the consistent one, is for every 2.5 regular members, you should have one municipal employee. On average right now, we're shooting for every community for roughly 3 to 3.4 members to one municipal employee. So we're trying to bring those up. So for example, in the city of Langford gave us 4 positions last year. Along with that, they gave us 2 municipal employees. So when I do a presentation and say I'm looking for regular members, there's usually a follow-up discussion that we need to balance out that ratio for municipal employee. So at 16.6, and you will have 7 municipal employees.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none. Okay. Thank you, Inspector. We will move on to our next department then.
Thank you very much. So we'll go backwards in the financial plan document, page 19, and we'll discuss the corporate administration operating budget. And one thing I mentioned as well is that the way that we've presented the departments is probably fairly new to council as well as the public and ourselves. So included in the corporate administration budget, you're going to have our communications. You're going to have our human resource component as well. So what we have recommended overall for an increase to the corporate administration budget is 3.6%. And much of that is as a result of the corporate administration line item there. You see a 5.8% increase to that. And that, for the most part, is accounted for by the election expense this year. So we're expecting to see an increase in that this year. That'll come back down next year and after 4 years, 2022, assuming the province doesn't change the legislation again, we'll incur that election expense again. The other let's call them divisions within the corporate administration department. There's recommended modest increases: 1.7% for council and committee, 1.9% for communications, 1% for risk management, 2.9% for human resources, and there's a decrease in the grant and aid as a result of the grant and aid discussions that we had earlier this year. Okay. So in addition to that, just moving into new operating budget items, we'll discuss the HR manager position. Last year, as you may recall, council approved the appointment of an HR manager, pardon me, not the appointment, include funding for an HR manager in the budget. So last year, half of that was funded, and this is just a continued transition from 0.5 to 1.0. So the cost of that is $66,000, and we're recommending again that the funding for that be part of that non-market change revenue that was detailed earlier. I just would like to talk a bit in brief, every department that we discuss, about some of the accomplishments from last year and some of the plans that we have for 2018, just with the intention of demonstrating, some of the good work that these budgets pay for and what they will pay for in the beginning. So looking at some of our accomplishments from 2017, we recorded that there was quite a reduction in occupational health and safety incidents. We rolled 3,000%. Really, we had zero occupational health and safety incidents last year. So there's really some outstanding change, and we're quite pleased to see the well-being of our staff is being taken care of quite significantly as a result of the efforts there. I believe in 2013 there was 260 hours lost to WCB claims, and in 2017 there was zero. So just a good demonstration of the fine work that Linda's doing over, and the dividends that it's paying both in the health of our employees and financially as well. You'll remember last year that audiovisual was upgraded in council chambers, and I think that's been welcomed quite a bit. We are in the middle of using a new committee structure that was approved by council that has received some praise from the public, especially in terms of the public participation. Our business license system, online renewal system, was upgraded and streamlined in line with the reduction and elimination of business license fees. And there were many, many events hosted this year and planned events for next year for the community to engage in. So some of the plans for next year, the Corporate Administration Division was working on finalizing negotiations with CUPE, which is underway as we speak. They would like to review and update the Council's Procedure Bylaw and Delegation of Authority Bylaw. Our records management software and system could use a refresh. And the division would like to initiate an audit of the information and privacy practices to ensure we're in compliance and ensure we have the best practices in place. They need to manage the 2018 general election, as we're all aware, and the division would like to continue with some of the excellent events that occurred last year and will continue next year. So now I'll just discuss some of the special projects that are on the books as we speak. The Communications Department would like to continue with the waterfront interpretive signs, which was approved last year. It's a carry forward from last year. Continue with the public art project. And then we have a citizen survey budgeted for 2019, and that's expected to continue every 2 years or so in the budget. So that'll conclude my comments. open to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. I just want to ask the Director of Admin if she had anything to add. If not, it's okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I think you covered it really quite well, and I'm really quite pleased with this new presentation document. So thanks to the Director and the Deputy Director.
Great. Thank you. Open it up to the public if you have any questions or comments. No? Committee. Oh, Councillor Nault.
I'm just curious about the risk management. It was 211,000 almost in 2017, the actual. Why was that so much higher than what was budgeted?
Through the chair, that's mostly legal costs. We have included in the risk management category as well our liability insurance, the general liability insurance, but that was as expected. So legal costs can be variable in nature.
Thank you. And the other question was human resources. The actual was 100,000 less than the budget. I assume that's because the position was not filled.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
Not seeing any further questions, we'll move on to the next department. Please, Christopher.
Thank you. Deputy Director Hepton's going to take you through the finance department.
Thank you. So moving over to page 23 of the financial plan document, I'll just provide a high-level overview of the finance operating budget. There's some nominal revenues that are listed there. We're not expecting too much change with respect to those revenues. Other finance department revenue, specifically that is the interest that we collect on overdue accounts receivable, as well as any non-sufficient fund revenue that we collect. Moving down to our operating budget, we are looking at a nominal 0.9% increase. Approximately 90% of our operating budget is staffing costs. So we have incorporated an increase for projected labor increases, but we did reduce our overtime budget just based on actual expenses that we did incur in the past year. And we also had a nominal increase there for one of our one-off projects last year related to our chart of account conversion. Just commenting on our 2017 actuals and where they came in relation to our 2017 budget. The finance department does have one FTE that is on a union leave, and we have been filling that position, but not to the full extent of the year nor to the full extent of the cost of that position. So that is why we did come in under budget. Also, we haven't yet accrued our year-end costs for the upcoming audit, so we will see some additional costs come in there. Just moving over to the accomplishments from 2017. 2017 for us is a big focus on staffing, so we both created and hired for an IT coordinator position. We also had some succession planning with our Director of Finance's retirement this past summer. As well, we continued work with improving customer service by way of implementing a pre-authorized payment plan for our property taxpayers, and created and implement a new chart of account structure to really help improve financial reporting and budget variance reporting as well. Moving to this year for our plans, really, continue with policy review and operational improvements. Specifically, we have a number of policies that we intend to review, including our investment policy, and we do anticipate that we will be increasing our returns on investment this year, and we have factored that into our budget. We'll continue work with respect to revisions to the purchasing policy and how we can streamline our purchasing function as an organization. As well as a comprehensive reserve fund policy overview. We have a number of reserve fund bylaws, and we'd like to review those and ensure they're meeting our needs. As well, this document before you, this is, a first for us with respect to really trying to present the financial plan and the budget in terms of service level and that sort of thing. So we'll continue working on that. And again, internal service improvements. looking to work with the other departments in the organization with respect to assisting engineering with the new DCC bylaw, coming up with an asset management roadmap as to how we will continue implementation there. And that really concludes my comments with respect to financial services. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Seeing nobody from the public, committee, Councillor Nault.
Just a quick question on the funding part of your budget. You show a school tax administration fee. I assume that's because we collect the school tax for the schools. Is there no CRD administration fee or hospital administration fee?
Excellent question.
No, there is no direct fee that we collect. Perhaps some may argue that we do have some control with respect to when we remit the funds to those jurisdictions. So we do benefit with respect to the interest revenue that we collect on those funds. But in terms of a stated fee, it is simply the province providing that school tax admin fee.
Is there any way we could consider instituting such a fee?
Through the chair, the school tax admin fee is a legislated fee that they give to us. So it's here you go. No such legislated structure exists for us to be able to charge the schools, or pardon me, or the hospitals or the regional district.
I was just thinking it would be nice because it's our staff that takes all the flack when their costs go up, and we don't really get anything out of it.
Yeah. Seeing no, Councillor Chong.
Thank you. Through the chair to staff. Just looking at the property tax collected, I'm wondering if you could tell us the ratio between residential and commercial.
Spain?
If I recall correctly, because I was just looking at this recently, the percentage of the total tax of general paid by business was around 21%, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe residential was around 71%, with the remaining classes making up the middle. But that's something I'll have to confirm for you and have ready for a tax rate discussion.
Mayor Hamilton and then Councillor Day.
Yeah, and mine was on the new electronic timesheet program. Is that flexible enough to capture in a project costs, and so that we can better define?
Yes, so we are planning to implement this new timesheet program. It is a product of our current core financial software provider. So one of the primary reasons we're looking at this is it's a direct integration with our software. It's also intended to be more user-friendly for staff. Staff can access it on iPads, on their iPhones, and it does allow us greater detail with respect to project costing. That being said, the expectation of the provider is that we have a separate module that we haven't yet implemented, so we're still exploring that. But we've been working on the configuration work over the last couple of months, and it definitely looks to be more user-friendly for staff.
Mr. Paine? Follow on?
Just to answer Councillor Chong's previous question more directly. So last year in 2017, the residential class paid for 76.6% of the total property tax pie, if you will, and the business class is 21.4%.
Councillor Day?
Thank you. The mayor kind of stole my thunder, because that was my question, was about the electronic timesheet program. So I guess I'll just make mine a comment that I'm really hoping that we can get to a point where we are more realistically accounting for our employees' time in terms of what they're working on. I know there's a lot of cross-training and cross-assistance that happens, which is how we work, and that's great. But it would be really good to be able to quantify that a little bit, so that we have a better understanding, not just of how we use our assets, but also how we use our people.
Great. Mr. Paine?
Yes, and I would just add to that some of the work that the Finance Department undertook last year will greatly support that objective. The reconfiguration of the chart of accounts was a giant leap forward, in my opinion, in terms of defining the activities of the work that's completed by the Public Works employee. And we'll touch on this in the next meeting, but I'm also quite aware that the Director of Engineering as well as the Operations Manager have been working closely to define specifically the services that they want to provide with their staff. And this budget is developed with that in mind. So we'll see that at the next meeting, but absolutely appreciate those comments, yes.
Thank you. Seeing no more questions, we'll move on.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So moving on to page 25, Information Technology Operating Budget. And there's a number of changes to the presentation of this budget and a number of things that I'd like to touch base on. For the most part, this is for part of it, it's a business as usual budget. You'll notice that the IT general budget increase is recommended to be 0.2%. Mind you, last year in the IT operating budget, we had included in the operating portion replacement of our computers, our computer hardware in the amount of $25,000 a year, as well as replacement of IT network infrastructure in the amount of $25,000 a year, so approximately $50,000 altogether. What we've decided to do this year is take that out of the IT budget and instead replace that with a transfer to reserve. There's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, having it in the operating budget sort of compelled us to have to spend on an annual basis, and that's not always necessary. For instance, last year, I believe we spent $17,000 on computer replacement, but we had $25,000. So instead, we will convert it to a transfer to reserve so that funding is available when we do need to make those bulk purchases. So for instance, when we get to the capital budget, you'll notice 2021, I believe it is, we've estimated that we'll make a bulk purchase, replace most of the computer hardware we have now, and benefit from the economies of scale at that time, and we'll have the funding available that was in the transfer to reserve. So that's the reason why overall the IT budget used to be $350, now it's $312,000. But the big ticket item which council will want to consider carefully is the new operating budget item, which would be the creation of a fully funded, independent internal IT department. And as I've mentioned in the financial plan document, the current model is we pay $50,000 a year to Langford for support of our existing software and our existing network. And that served Colwood well for a number of years, but it feels like we're outgrowing that service, and many of the services that are being requested of our IT department, Langford no longer supports. So moving to a fully funded internal and independent IT department would allow us to set our own destiny, if you may, with respect to the growing services that the community expects from our IT department. So should council approve that, an additional $112,000 would be required in annual funding, and as well as the one-time transitional cost, which would be incurred this year, could be up to $101,000, which is being requested in the special project. The way I equate it to is the current system is a good system, but but there's a limit to the service that can be provided from that when you compare it to the service that would be provided with an internal system, an internal department. So should we have an independent internal department, we would have staff available 24/7 for on-call. We would have a fully funded equipment replacement and desktop replacement, as I touched on before. We would have fully funded lease for our printers and other contracts. And the IT staff could participate in the implementation of new technology as opposed to just being limited by the existing technology, which is what Langford currently supports. So some of the accomplishments from 2017, we were able to hire our in-house support technician, who has made a significant difference to the user experience. We've signed a GIS shared service agreement with CRD. Michael has assisted greatly in improving the council chamber video feed and audio visual display to the benefit of our citizens as well as council and staff. And we've begun inventorying our information technology, and that's important for our asset management purposes. And we expect to finish that inventory next year, and so we can have a sustainable infrastructure replacement funding set for our IT. So in 2018, we'll finish that inventory. We'll establish those sustainable infrastructure levels, assuming that council approves those transfer to reserves. We'd like to prepare a robust disaster recovery plan, and we would like to begin migrating all of the Colwood IT network to an internal service as opposed to externally supported currently. The last thing I'll touch on is a special project related to the network security audit, and that is currently slated for 2019. So that's a new special project that you would not have seen in the 2017 financial plan. And I would recommend this special project regardless of whether or not the city chooses to implement an internal department. It's essentially a test of the individuals we have working for us in terms of social engineering. Most of the IT security concerns that exist today aren't actually related to the technology. They're not related to the actual IT infrastructure. Those are pretty secure. It's more about exploiting human behavior. And so an IT security audit goes a long way at testing human behavior, bringing it to the forefront, and making sure that our staff are well armed to ensure that nothing serious happens. That'll conclude my comments for the IT department. Look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Open it up to the public. Oh, Chris and then Dave.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. I'm Chris Wright. I reside on Marianne Crescent, and just very quickly, I'd like to say that I support the internalization of the city's IT program. That sounds like a really good idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, staff. Dave Saunders, 813 Pears Road. I just wanted to know the actual cost of what we pay right now for the IT.
Through the chair, including the funding of the equipment, $354,000 would have been last year's budget. So that's been removed from the 2017 $311,000.
Okay. So that it's Langford's IT department. Have we notified them at all that this may be changing? Or? Through
the chair, we have entered into discussions with them. So they're under no. It's not a secret to them that we're considering internalizing the department. Okay. And what we have with their contract is a 1-year opt-out clause. We haven't triggered that just yet, pending discussions with council.
Okay. And have we looked at a different type of delivery service other than just bringing it in-house?
Through the chair, not fully. So this recommended budget provides a budget envelope for us to provide any solution. Now, when we actually go to create or expand the current IT department as it is now, we would look at all options, including different levels of support. So, for instance, Langford has mentioned that they can support certain components of our IT infrastructure if we choose, and we can have that outsourced and continue to outsource to Langford. Or we could say, no, we want to completely maintain our IT infrastructure ourselves, or we could support just our software ourselves, and they do the. So there's a number of different options from A to Z, and we would be looking at what the best option for Colwood is and bringing that back to council for consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. committee? Councillor Day?
I just I wanted to speak to last year's funding versus this year's funding because, and maybe you just said it, but I didn't quite catch it. Last year you said it was something like $354,000, and this year we're at looking for 312. So did that include the cost savings, or are there cost savings reflected in this?
Through the chair, last year's budget included the operating budget for the equipment replacement. So since I'm proposing that we take that out of the budget and turn it into a transfer reserve, I've restated what the 2017 budget would had that been a transfer to reserve. So overall, the change remains the same to the taxpayer, but this more accurately depicts when comparing one year to the other.
Okay, so going forward, then, just to make sure I got that clearly, we're looking to spend about the same amount on IT, but looking at migrating to an in-house system.
Through the chair, no, to support a fully independent IT department, it would be an additional $112,000, bringing the total budget to $424,000.
Councillor, Mayor Hamilton and Councillor Knoll.
No, I found it. Sorry, I was just finding it on the page there, so I see that now.
Yep, just to say that this is increasingly becoming a high-risk area with any government or business, and having been involved in other corporations situations where things have gone sideways, it is important that we are looking to be nimble and on top of what happens. And I know two of us sitting at the table here are not using iPads because they're down and out at the moment, and we become a work ticket for our support services in order to get that resolved. So it's impeding the work we do and slowing things down. So I think we have a duty to look to this and find the best way forward, whatever it works out to, and we're looking forward to the reports coming sooner than later.
Councillor Knoll?
Yeah, just again for clarification, does the 2017 budget amount contain the $50,000 we spent on Langford?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
So we won't be spending that if we go to our own IT department. Where does that savings get reflected?
That's reflected in the $112,000. So that includes new incremental costs, less incremental savings, which would be the $50,000 as well.
So the actual cost of going to the internal IT is $162,000?
Yes, if you don't include the reduction of the contract expense.
Thank you. I too would agree with Mayor Hamilton in terms of the level of service received from an in-house versus an external organization. I've experienced both with Island Health, and certainly there's an importance placed on your IT ticket when it's serviced in-house. But I also understand that our IT coordinator, he's pretty darn gung-ho and has a lot of great ideas in terms of how the system should be managed, and we could in fact realize some additional savings in the coming years now that we have that flexibility to be able to determine our own destiny as an organization. So I think for the past number of years this was a good path, but now we've kind of grown up and are requiring additional technology and some support. So I think this is a good move personally. Seeing no further questions, we'll move on to the next department.
All right, so moving over to page 29, we'll be looking at our fire department. I'll start now with an overview of the fire department's operating budget. This department operates with a budget of approximately $2 million. As we touched on earlier this evening, we are looking at an increase to the core operating budget with respect to the escalating fire dispatch costs. So we have factored an increase in for those, and that really is what brings us to the proposed 4.7% lift there. With respect to a review of the 2017 actual costs incurred versus the 2017 budget, the expected Crest radio upgrades, that was deferred to 2018. So we did see some saving, well, we just didn't incur the expenses for 2017 there. Also, our 2017 salary and benefit budget did not factor in the effects of the internal shuffle with respect to the hiring of our fire chief and moving from 2 to 1 deputy chiefs. As well, training and professional development, repairs and maintenance and insurance, those expenses all came in under budget for the 2017 year for various reasons. Moving over to some of the many accomplishments from 2017, a couple that we would like to highlight for you. Staff did outfit the 2 fire engines with full medical equipment, including defibrillators on board. We can now use those 2 engines for medical calls. As well, staff upgraded all of our hoses. We now have heavy rescue hydraulic hoses that use a new technology for rescue. And moving over onto the next page, with respect to plans for 2018, we'd want to highlight that we will be beginning a fire department strategic planning process this year. So that is one of the focuses for 2018. And happy to answer any questions, and our fire chief is with us as well tonight.
Thank you. Chief, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, through the chair. The list of accomplishments in 2017 is quite long and varied. In 17, we actually, internally, we changed a lot of things about how we were doing business. And my focus in 17 was efficiencies in use, redundancy in how we provide our service to our community, and also with an eye of looking forward to where development is taking us in the future. A lot of what we're looking at internally is how we move and move water through hoses, and what equipment we need for the slate of mid-rise 4 to 6 story wood frame buildings that we're seeing extensive plans through the planning department. So we are looking forward and planning for the growth of our community, and that leads into what one of my goals for 18 is to start a strategic planning process, and that will start from the interior, from the fire department itself, its members, and we'll start building on that over the next couple of years, so we will have an idea of where we see the department in conjunction with the city, where we're going to be 3, 5, 10, 20 years from now. So we actually will have a basis for moving forward that is sustainable, and that's one of my projects that I will be starting in 2018.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dave, this is probably where you want to ask your question.
Thank you, Chief. So I'm not sure who I asked the question to, probably finance. So right now I need to understand, or try to understand, the escalating fire dispatch costs, because when we entered into the service, we were kind of told that it wouldn't escalate much. And in fact, when we first entered into it and moved away from Langford, we were told that it wouldn't escalate at all, and it was going to be cost neutral. That didn't come to fruition, but now we're seeing a substantial increase. So I'd just like to understand why that increase is so substantial.
Chief, did you?
Thank you, through the chair. When we left Langford and we entered into a 5-year agreement with the District of Saanich for dispatch services, at the time the dispatch services were roughly cost neutral, because part of that was we were giving up some of our electronic licenses on how we do our data management. So then we entered into a 5-year contract with Saanich, and then that contract is now up. They have now come out with a new costing formula of where they would like to see the next 5-year contract go. So in 2017, we paid $89,000 annually for our dispatch contract. They have proposed that by 2021, we will be paying 130, and we're not actually really comfortable with some of the way they've done their costing formula. So what we've done is Colwood, along with 4 other municipalities, have put out an RFP to see what the industry with other dispatch services is, what the industry standard is, to see if that costing model is realistic or not. It's not really for us to say, oh, we're paying too much or we want to amend our service. Well, what does industry say that our services should be costing us? So we're in that right now. The RFP has gone out. I believe the close date is somewhere around the end of February, and then we will be looking at reviewing all the responses and seeing what our dispatch costs should be that industry is telling us. Does that answer your question?
It helps me understand
Okay.
it a little bit better. So one question I do have, you've gone out to an RFP process, so 4 member municipalities have done that?
There's five municipalities are involved.
Okay, so that dispatch, how many areas have you sent that out to, I guess?
All dispatch centers in BC,
Okay.
as well as, all dispatch centers in BC, so that would include Surrey, Campbell River, Ecom, Saanich, Langford, so all the ones that are operating, and we'll see how many responses we get back.
Okay, so I guess to council, we stay together as a united front, or we separate. Is there a cost differentiation between the 130 that's proposed with Saanich model? If a few, say 2 of those 5 members opt out, I'm not sure. If 130 would go up, if we decided to stay with Saanich?
Through the chair, we've been quoted by 2021 at a dispatch cost of 130. We don't know until the RFPs come back is what the actual service cost from another provider will be. So that's part of the process, is evaluating what the numbers come in. We have been given hard numbers by Saanich of what their projected formula would say, and it's based on population and call volume. So if our population increased significantly in the next 2 years and we stayed with Saanich, the costs would vary. So it's only in a matrix that we're trying to project. They're giving us a projection how the costs are moving forward, and we're trying to verify that are those costs reasonable? Because that's what we're trying to do.
And I understand that. So, but say if 2 other municipalities opted out of the Saanich program as it exists right now, would that affect our 130,000, or is that specifically?
No, we've been told no, because with their matrix is they're giving us the information that this is what your projected cost will be.
Okay, great. No, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Null? Oh, sorry, Chris, sorry. You've been so quiet tonight. Sorry about that, Chris.
Yeah, psych, a question. So I'm very happy to see that the number of volunteers is expected to increase in 2018, but I don't understand why the number of training hours is decreasing. Perhaps it'd be nice to hear some comments as to what's driving that change.
Chief?
Thank you. Through the chair. In 2017, we put forward a very, very ambitious training schedule through the training office, and that is reflected in the budgets requested by the training division. In 17, he was unable to secure all the courses that he wanted to fill, and it's also the time commitment of the volunteers. Is how we project X number of courses and X number of seats per course, and as the courses become available, we're seeing that what we would wish to happen isn't always available because we're relying on mostly the volunteers' time to come in, take time off work, and make themselves available for these. So that's where you will see some fluctuation in the numbers. Again, also in 2017, we made a significant movement towards going from the old training standard that was dictated by the Justice Institute or the Fire Academy. In 2017, the Office of the Fire Commissioner's playbook really came into play, and that sets a different skill levels and course levels and for each individual firefighter and fire officer. We saw a big uptake in training hours because of that playbook coming in. And in talking to the training officer, he is expecting the training hours to go down because now we're on a level playing field. So the uptake in training hours to get us to that standard, that revised standard, is now over, and now we're training to that standard, so we shouldn't incur those extra training hours. So looking forward, he's projecting a slight decrease in the overall training hours because of the way things have organized out. Okay.
Committee? Jason?
Two quick questions. First, I'm, again, also happy to see the number of volunteers increasing, but I don't see any significant change in the operating expenses. I'm just wondering how we're managing that with increasing our volunteers by about 15%.
Chief?
We do have the biggest equation for cost factor for bringing on volunteers is equipping them. So with turnout gear, uniforms, things like that, as well as bringing them up through our training modules or training standards, usually which is spaced over 3 years. It usually takes about 3 years to train a volunteer firefighter. All of those costs we can absorb with existing budgets without putting too much strain on the overall operating. Part of that strategic planning process is where do we go right now? Because right now we're under our allotted makeup of volunteers. Is we have previously been approved by council to go up to 45 volunteers, but we can't get the applications in the door. Unfortunately, we're finding the pressure of the people aren't beating down our doors like they used to 10 and 15 years ago because it is getting very, very expensive to live. So we're projecting that we can accommodate the small increases with existing budgets as they are now.
Thank you. And the other question is on the number of responses. I see a year-to-year increase of 7 or 8%. Do you expect that to continue into the future? And at what point will we need to do major expenditures on more equipment?
So a couple of questions there. Yes, we're working on our year end right now, and overall, I believe the secretarial staff has said we've had approximately a 13% rise in calls over last year. We do expect that to grow at perhaps the same elevation as we move forward with the development of our community. We don't expect any huge increases in equipment costs. Major equipment costs we've gone over with the Director of Finance in projecting out on our capital replacement. We see that we may see staffing costs go up, but in the next 2 or 3 years, we may see a staffing report come forward, but that will be driven from the strategic planning process that we're undertaking to see what we think our needs are going to be in the future, but also what we think in working with council is what is sustainable as well. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and what I am concerned about is at some point the fire hall is not going to be big enough, and when do we start planning for a second fire hall, I guess would be my question. And that would be a strategic planning exercise, not an annual budget.
Thank you. Through the chair, there have been discussions at staff level about where projected growth within the city and how the fire department would fit into that. So another fire hall, another location, those conversations have taken place, and we're just seeing how the community grows is basically we have to have some development to pay for any other things. So they're very preliminary at this point.
Great. Thank you. Not seeing any further questions or comments, we'll move on to the next department.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I go through the Building and Bylaw Department numbers, I'd just like to make a few corrections to some of the numbers. And just so Council knows, this is our version 1. There's some typos here and there. We will have a version 2 2 weeks from now. No substantive changes to the overall picture, but some corrections with typos and what have you. So, for instance, on page 34, we have the number of employees 2016 at 6, 2017 at 7.2. For 2018, the projected, at least what's being requested here, is 6.6, not 7 as reported there. And the second typo would be on the building and bylaw operating budget schedule. Down below, we have total operating expenses at minus 4.6%. That should actually say minus 14%. So that just provides a bit of a different context, so that's why I thought I would mention it. So I'll discuss, to begin with, some of the changes in the projected building permit fees, and I just want to reassure council and the staff, council and the public, that this, you shouldn't be alarmed. So you'll see there's a minus 25% almost decrease in building permit revenue that we've projected, and there's a minus 35% decrease in plumbing permit fees that we've projected. If you recall back to the 2016 budget, all the way back then, building permit fees were projected around, or budgeted around $550,000. And then in 2017, there was that substantial lift to the $1.2 million. The previous director of finance wisely recognized that that increase wasn't a sustainable increase. It wasn't going to be an ongoing thing, and put those incremental revenues in a reserve, one-time transfer to reserve. And so this year, as we project it decreases, we've reduced that transfer to reserve. It set aside some additional money in our infrastructure deficit reserve. Really what the city wants to concentrate on going forward is our sustainable transfers. Those transfers that will occur each and every single year, that will impact taxpayers each and every single year, and will eventually pay for sustainable infrastructure in the future. This is more of a one-time transfer that could support it, but it's not an annual transfer because it was completely dependent on that increased building permit revenues. So discussing that with our manager of building and bylaw, we've arrived at a lower amount, but again, that won't impact taxes. It will simply reduce that one-time transfer to reserve that we had previously forecasted. Another thing you might note in the revenue section is our business license fees. They've come down quite a bit since 2016. Mind you, we received about $9,500 in new business license fees last year, and yet we've projected $2,000 for 2018. We could probably adjust that quite a bit. I was discussing with the department today, and in fact, there were over 90 new business license applications received last year. So that's a pretty good number. And the budget as it is right now assumes only 20, but I think that could be adjusted at some point. Not talking big dollars in the grand scheme, but certainly something that could be adjusted. So overall, we have a bylaw enforcement as a projected decrease, and that is a result of the staffing changes that were made recently. Our animal control contract with the CRD has remained stable, and that's set in stone, so a 0.9% increase. And then we're expecting a minus 8.7% decrease in building inspection, for a total decrease in this operating budget of minus 14%. However, there is a new operating budget item request to continue to manage the increase in the building permit files, and we're trying to find, I think as a team, we're trying to find that proper, that balance for what the staffing requirements are. So the city staff is requesting an increase of the building inspector full-time equivalents by 0.4. Currently, we have one full-time plus 2.6 for a total of 2.2 full-time equivalents. The request is to increase it from 2.2 to 2.6, and we would simply convert one of those to a full-time equivalent. So that request is approximately $45,000. So some of the accomplishments, the public is quite aware of some of the successful development permits that have been issued, and as a result, some builds that have occurred throughout the community, including down at Royal Bay, a Brooks School, and Pacific Landing. And so those, the work on those developments as well as other developments will continue in 2017. Hopefully there's continued progress at Colwood Corners and much of the other developments that you will see around the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Open it up to the public. Committee? No. Next department, please.
Okay, so moving along to the planning department. And we'll start with a review of the operating budget. I would like to highlight the development permit fees. They did come in well over budget this year. Ultimately, any surplus that we generate will simply contribute to our general accumulated surplus. We spoke with our director of planning just moments before this meeting to confirm, the proposed 2018 budget, and really it all just depends on what happens with some of the developments within Colwood. In all likelihood, we could end up seeing actual development permit revenue come in over proposed budget for this year, but we are taking a conservative approach with respect to that budgeted revenue. Moving over to the operating budget for that department, we are seeing a slight decrease in the core operating budget. And that primarily is related to some shifting with some of the positions of that department. And with respect to the actual expenditures, we did have a vacancy with one of the planner positions for a period of the year. As well, the approving officer function used to sit within this department, and it now sits within a division under engineering. Number of accomplishments from 2017 listed, certainly starting with the incredible amount of work on the revised official community plan. I believe staff are feverishly working right now on getting a second draft out. And moving over to plans for 2018, following the revised official community plan, staff will be initiating a review and an update of the land use bylaw. And so on that note, that really takes us into some of the special projects, the one-time operating expenditures for this department. As we did mention last year, the land use bylaw update, it became clear for staff that that was really going to come after a revision to the city's official community plan took place. And we are proposing that work will happen over the 2018 and 2019 year. The affordable housing contributions, we believe the figures stated here will be updated to reflect the council resolutions that were made last year. And again, once the housing agreements for those two affordable housing projects are registered on title, we will be making those contributions. The area planning project that's stated there, it's almost a contingency related to one of our developments. So there's a chance that funding may or may not be required. The next project listed is a demographic study, proposed budget of $20,000, and this project is proposed as an immediate action item within the city's draft official community plan. We don't have the detail listed on this page, but we will be updating it. The OCP does require some funding in terms of implementation works, so we do have a budget of $20,000 set aside there for training and for material production and in terms of guides and that sort of thing. And then lastly listed, we also have a project proposed for 2019 related to an energy and emissions plan, looking to develop an updated community energy and emissions plan, and proposed funding again for that $50,000. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I see the Director of Planning is here as well. Did you have anything to add to the presentation?
No, I think that was excellent. I'm here to answer questions, and
Great, thank you. Open it up to the public. Committee? Councillor Knoll?
Just a general comment. I see through the budget, a lot of the new operating budget items have a dollar tax impact written with them, but the actual operating budgets do not have the actual dollar tax impact quoted for, and that might be useful to have. Yeah, I'm not really quick at multiplying 4.1% of the average home's taxes, but it would be useful to have that information to keep a running tab, because at the beginning of the report you say the overall budget has a $23 impact on the average household, but if I add up the extra items, I'm coming up with over $40 already. So I'm assuming those are more than matched by savings in some of the departments, but I can't get that easily from this document.
Chris?
Noted, and thank you, Councillor Nault. The new operating budget items that you have that are separated and that do have a tax input attached to them, our recommendation is to fund that for the new market, the new construction revenue, which is why it doesn't, which is why overall it won't increase the tax impact much like the operating core would.
Okay. Cynthia?
Thanks. Kind of a question just to follow up. Given that the community energy and emissions plan is in there for 2019, and that there was a presentation given on climate change issues and the work that's been done within the city of Colwood at the Planning Institute conference, I just thought it might be worthwhile for a presentation to be made for our community on the things that we've done about climate change, just to bring the community on board, get everything all nicely in a basket before the energy and emissions plan is undertaken.
Thank you. Any further comments on the planning section? Oh, Mayor?
Just on the affordable housing fund that we work with in our municipality, now that the CRD has structured it, that all municipalities are required to pay, and that we'll see that on our requisition this year through the CRD. It might be something that we need to look at in a different way in here, because in essence all taxpayers will be paying towards that affordable housing regional CRD, and then we have this, and making sure that we're maximizing and getting the best use of those dollars going forward.
Okay. Great. Not seeing any more hands. We'll move on to item 5.3, the wrap-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just summarize some of the things we've discussed today and going forward, and just make some general comments. So I'm looking forward to our second meeting 2 weeks from now. Just to wrap up again, what we're proposing in this financial plan, unless amended by council, is a 1.3% tax increase to all classes. We are projecting $495,000 in new construction revenue. That is contingent on our revised assessment roll, which we will receive in March. So historically, we haven't seen a huge swing, but potentially that could change that figure. If that were to occur, we could simply adjust our transfer to reserve amounts. So from that, we'd like to, or we recommend funding the new operating items in the amount of $265,000 and increase the transfer reserve of $230,000. And in general, I just wanted to speak about the, let's say, the quality of this financial plan. And I think as a management team, we've taken a specific effort this year to ensure that the projects in particular that are included in this plan, we've costed out, and we anticipate that we can do the work, because we want to put together a financial plan that is representative of the work that is going to occur for the community. So you'll notice, for instance, when we get to the wrap-up meeting in March 5th, there's not a lot of special projects that are populated in year 4 and 5. We are going to undertake some work to do more long-range planning, but we want to make sure it's accurate before we put it before council. And that will be the same message that we'll be giving through the capital budget project. Again, a lot of capital in the first couple of years because that's how far we can see. But we want to do some more work with our long-range planning, provide some certainty in the budget to council, and that also provides some certainty to the public in terms of the work that we are going to undertake in the next 5 years. So with that, I just want to thank council and the public for attending today. I look forward to our next meeting 2 weeks from now. And if there's any final comments or questions, more than happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll just go to our final public participation if you had anything to add before we wrap up. No, seeing none. Next meeting is scheduled February the 19th. Same time, same place. Can I have a motion to adjourn? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.